Good morning, everyone. My name is Rosabelle. I am currently a second year student majoring in global health and human development and context. And I'm also within the Weinberg School and the School of Education and Social Policy. So if you guys have any questions about both schools, also reach out to me. I can also put my email. So I'll pass it to Nikki.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Nikki Okrah. I'm Weinberg, class of 2011, and I currently serve as the CEO and founder of Chaku Foods, a company that's using AI and ML-based platform to predict yields of African farmers so we can make them more money and get better crops and foods to global consumers. And we also have a snack line called Nikki's Plantain Crisp, where we export and sell in the US.
Okay, so I'm gonna start just having a discussion with you, Nikki, and I'm gonna ask a few questions about your experience during Northwestern, and just questions of curiosity. So the first question is, what were some of the impactful classes or experiences for you at Northwestern that led you to consider and pursue your chosen field?
Yes, there were a number of different activities and things I did on campus that I think have led me into the space I'm in right now. And I think our early start was with the Posner Fellowship. I really wanted this investment banking internship my sophomore summer, and I was a finalist for one, and I got an offer, and or I thought I was getting an offer rather, and I think something kind of happened in the 11th hour, and it didn't pull through. And I was really disappointed about it. I went to one of my academic advisors. They told me, look, you're a sophomore, you have plenty of time ahead of you. And so why don't you actually try doing this Posner Fellowship over the summer? And I wasn't really sure about research or, what it would entail. It seemed very free flowing. And so I was able to pick a topic of my choosing. My family's from Ghana. I grew up mainly in the US, having lived in Ghana as a child. I, ended up researching remittance and kinship networks, which is very narrow, but it was broad to begin with. I worked with Professor Brian Hansen, who was in the political science department at the time, as an advisor. I was in Chicago during the summer. I'd used the Herzkovits library, and I found that it was a great space to kind of just research a topic I was keen on, practice communicating with a professor who ended up being a great advisor and a sounding board for recommendations later on for different things. And I think it really took me out of just looking at banking and consulting as being, the only path for a career, to kind of exploring, well, what are my interests, and if I did want to do banking or consulting, like, why is it? Is it the learning? Is it the culture? It made me really think more broadly, not just about my project, but to apply that to my life and think more critically about, my life, my time at Northwestern, and what I wanted to be doing. And so, that rejection was actually a blessing ultimately, and I think was protecting me from just looking at a very singular path and what other people were doing, and just kind of having this free-flowing experience and taking a step back and saying, okay, what did I like about the research? I love the topic area. I liked interacting with the professor. I liked that it pushed me to think, that it allowed me to use resources at the library. And I even liked being in Chicago in the summer, and during the winter it was horrible. So I think that it really gave me a really unique perspective about, okay, what do you like and not like about environments, work? How do you think of a topic, and how do you actually break down the pieces of the topic? And then how do you actually get help from people who are, experts, or, professors who can help guide you? And I think that those are things I use in my career now as an entrepreneur. And what I did as a professional when I interned at Google, when I worked at Visa, is that you're always going to different stakeholders, whether they're clients that you're trying to sell into, or your manager who you're trying to get feedback from, or you're trying to get help to move a particular project forward within the company. So it really helped build different skill sets that I didn't know at the time were valuable, but looking back, realize that that's a really important skill to have and things to learn. And so I really appreciated that perspective.
Thank you for sharing. Actually, I also did Posner my freshman year. I had no idea if I wanted to do research, so I just decided to try it out. So I worked in the infant cognition lab, and I noticed that research wasn't for me, but the skills I learned in the research department, and like, the people I worked with, was the greatest experience I have ever had in Northwestern with faculty. So thank you for sharing that. Yeah, so I have another question. What were some impactful classes or experiences outside of your major and minor?
I think that my major and minor had changed from when I started. And so I initially started with econ, and it was actually taking a few different poli-sci classes that made me kind of move into the poli-sci space. And one of them, um, the topic area was more theoretical, but I wrote a paper about um, liberation movements, and what are the preconditions to actually having them during that class. I'll try to think of the actual professor in the code to get to back to you guys later, but I just remember that looking at those topic areas, it was the first time I was ever really, pushed to think about, what made, apartheid liberation movements in South Africa successful versus like Northern Ireland movements, versus other ones, and what are the contexts of the countries or the leadership, or the dynamics that made that positive. And I think that it just really expanded me to learn to think critically about different topic areas. And when I think about business in the world today, you're always looking at how you can scale the impact, or whether it's a Google or Visa. Specifically, when I worked there, it was how do we accelerate electronic payments in different markets that are not there. When I moved from San Francisco to South Africa, the business landscape was very different from the US. And so having classes that really push you to think more broadly and strategically about, yourself and different parts of the world were super helpful. And secondary to that, it pushed me to actually be a poli-sci major, and instead of econ. And I actually ended up studying abroad in Spain as well when I was an undergrad and at Northwestern, and that experience was phenomenal. I think everyone should have an opportunity to study abroad, because you're young, it's a unique experience. I know that for me, it really helped me be outside of the Northwestern kind of bubble in Evanston. And during that time, I really got to have more free time to think. I started journaling. We traveled all around the country. I got to learn about a different context. I think that when you are, at least for me, when I was growing up in Massachusetts and then moved to Evanston, you're shaped by the communities that you're a part of, the institutions that we have Wildcat Welcome, we have traditions, we have songs, we have Evanston, we have Chicago, we have all of these things that are shaping us. And when we move outside of the environment, at least for me, when I moved outside and was in Spain, I realized, I like taking a siesta in the afternoon. Like I like being with my host family, and the fact that it's a very family oriented culture. I like that, the winter isn't harsh, or I like that, it didn't feel so regimented, whereas everything was, midterms week 3, midterm week 5, midweek team 7, lots of class schedules, and it's very fast paced. But being in a different culture and context, I really got to, understand my likes and dislikes, and I got to really see myself, as a individual and a person, in the way that I felt that I was going through the motions of career and culture, and the banking, consulting, and the econ pipeline. And I think that really opened me up to a broader set of what I can be exposed to and what I can actually do.
I have a question regarding study abroad. While doing study abroad, were you able to take classes that really interested you, or they had to be like part of your major to be able to have that opportunity?
Sorry, I muted. That's a great question. And I think that also, again, was a thread that pushed me more for, political science. I also had minors in African studies and business as well. And I love the business VIP curriculum, and I can speak to that later if folks are interested. But there was a set of classes, but we got to pick. So I took classes around, art, and was able to visit the Prado Museum, and go and see all types of, original works. I also took political science classes, and I took one on the economy as well. And so you were learning about history also of Spain, and, the politics, the culture, the business. And so much about the environment. And funny enough, fast forwarding to later on in my career, I had a boss who's actually from Madrid. And, he actually, and I was working in Joburg at the time, he ended up being the VP for the region. And so he was based in Dubai. And because I was smart and I had been in visa for a while, and because I also had cultural familiarity with his background in Spain, having studied abroad, he actually, was able to poach me from my team and gave me a promotion. And I, ended up moving to Dubai. And I thought it was, ironic and funny that, so much of what enabled me to have that really huge opportunity and more global exposure within the company wasn't just that I was smart and, had a great track record at Visa, but I had this cultural connection to this boss who was from Madrid. And, because I used to run around Retiro Park and I could speak Spanish and, engage with him on that level, it really enabled other aspects of my career. And, going back to your question around the classes, I think a lot of the classes ended up having credits that translated for my major, and I wanted to take those classes, so it just felt like a organic transition to, really study what I want to study versus what I think I should be studying to get a job that I think I should have.
I also heard you said that you build a connection within study abroad. So how would you recommend us to build connections within our social life or like just our career paths? Because I know sometimes it could be difficult for some students to get out of our comfort zone and just, try to build a connection. A lot of people always emphasize how important it is to build connections, but how can we approach that?
Great. I want to make sure I answer your question. Do you mean how to build connections to study abroad or
just in general, like throughout Northwestern or study abroad, like approaches that we can make?
Okay, that's a great question. I think that there's different buckets, and it can be from an interest area, student group, major, or profession. So for instance, I'm just in the beginning of this conversation, I've spoken about, briefly touched on, I had worked at Visa, I had interned at Google, I run an, ag tech / CPG company that's based in Ghana. And, if any of those things or, opportunity, I studied abroad in Spain, right, and in Madrid. So if any of those things interest you and you've heard it on the call, you could, there's many people on the call, so I can't answer like 100 emails, but you might say, I'm really, the Visa NGDP program is recruiting on campus. I know that you have been a part of it during your time here. I'm really interested in, working in that rotational program and getting international exposure. I'm this major, I'm this background, and, and you said you're from Massachusetts, I am from as well. I'd love to, understand, more about your experience. And specifically, what are things that I can do on campus to connect, or if you know anyone who's currently at Visa you think that I would be great to connect with, that would be, wonderful, right? Again, there's 100 of you here, so I can't do that for everyone, but a faster way to do that is that maybe you go on LinkedIn and you see that there's a Northwestern alum. I know a friend, Emma, works at Visa, and I'm connected to her. You could email me or message and say, hey, Nikki, I know that I see that. I'm sorry, to start off, you could say, hey, Nikki, I'm a student at Northwestern, I'm this major, I'm this minor. I went to the connections conversation, and I see that you're connected with this person at Visa on LinkedIn. Would you be able to make an introduction to us? Because I'm keen on doing this program. So again, that's a more broad email or messaging template, and I'm happy to, have certain ones to share with the group. I also think that working with faculty, going to office hours and then going to advising hours, and I see that the Waldron program is also a great facilitator. So that is another facilitator of these introductions, and as well as, Cassie, whose details are available here, and career services is, talking with anyone in those buckets, advising, career services, anyone who's available on campus, and really talking to them about where you're at, what your interests are, and they can also help guide you to different career opportunities, internships, folks to connect with. And usually they also have a broad network, and you're showing you're proactive. Even being on this call on on the morning early in January during a cold winter is really showing that you're already proactive and smart. So I think that people will just want to help you if they know, what your interests are, and how they can connect you with something that can help guide that interest.
Thank you. So, can you tell us about your first job or internship after undergrad, after you graduated?
Yeah, I can talk about both. So my first internship out of undergrad was at Google, and my first job was at Visa, the NGDP rotational program. So at Google, and Google was very different from what it is now. I graduated years ago in 2011, so it was 6 years post IPO. Tech wasn't what it is today. Like Twilio is a company that's 6 years post IPO, and I'm sure no one has heard of it, or maybe very few people have heard of Twilio. And so that was kind of how Google was. It was just, this new like startup, and they do search and they have algorithms, but it's very much a black box of tech. And I don't have a computer science background. And I know that for me, it was the third year of their non-engineering internship program. So it was very new, very experimentational. And I had studied abroad, and again, hadn't done the banking internship. I had done research the summer before. So by the time I came back, I actually got a finance internship I wanted, but I didn't think I wanted to do finance anymore. So it ended up being between this finance internship I thought I really wanted and changed my mind after studying abroad, having some time and thinking about what I might want to do, which was just not that. And it was actually through the help of one of my cousins who ended up being a mentor. He told me that it's rare to get opportunities in tech, especially not having a tech skill set. And even though people don't really understand tech and everyone's pushing you towards finance, you should feel comfortable going into Google, understanding how the business works, trying to get skills and see if that's where you want to work. Because when you're in college, he's 15 years older. He had gone to business school. He had actually worked in banking and consulting. And so he basically said that, use it as an opportunity to learn, understand the industry, and, you're in the process of ruling out what you don't like. So if you like it, great. If you like it, great. If you don't, think about things you did and didn't like and how you can move forward with that. So at Google, I was a part of a team that was working on their agency ad sales structure. And so the way they earn revenue is through ad sales, and that team was accelerating and building up. And so the things I liked about the internship was that, we had great training programs. I was using their internal systems and understanding AdWords better. We had executive exposure where we'd have these lunch and learns weekly. I had a mentor within the company. I had a great boss as well, who was more interested in finding out, what I liked, what I didn't like, whether I wanted to stay, what other opportunities, if I got an offer at the end of the summer, and if I wanted to, look at other things. And, we had free food, and I got to travel to different parts of the US as well. I interned at the Boston office, but we had our onboarding in the Mountain View office, so was in San Francisco. And so it just had we did presentations in New York. So I got to see different geographies, and I also got to meet different students. So when you're in Northwestern, I feel like you're just around other Northwestern students who you're having this great experience with. And I met people from, Georgia and Dartmouth and, Harvard and MIT and all these different schools. And they also had very different experiences as well. And so I really built this network that I'm still able to use now, and people who I'm just friends with. And so the AdWords learning, the understanding about tech, launch and iterate was a big theme that kept up coming in Google about how, we trying new products, we launch it and we iterate it based off of consumer feedback or what people are interacting with. And then having like data-driven results and, you really utilizing data science and things have blown up. And I'm talking about like over 10 years ago. So it's hard to frame these things because you're like, these things feel obvious, but they're very different at the time. And so I really enjoyed those aspects of the internship, meeting different people from different schools, getting outside the Northwestern bubble, being on the coasts again. So back in Massachusetts, where I grew up, in California for, our onboarding for a week. And then, the salary was good as well. So that, and which went mainly to my tuition. But those were all great aspects of interning at Google. But I knew that I wanted to know more about technology and be in the tech space, but I didn't want to be more pigeonholed into the advertising side of tech because I didn't have a engineering background or a CS background. And so that really helped me think about going into fall recruitment as a senior around what do I want to, I know I want to be in tech, and I know I want to learn technical things, and I know I don't have that background. And so what are the career opportunities and kind of businesses that will help me maybe get there? And I also went very broad. And so I had about, I interviewed at like Target and Microsoft and Visa and Nielsen, and I wouldn't recommend doing that like big dump in terms of all these places, but I got a ton of job offers. But I think it ultimately came down to the people and, that tech skill set, the rotational program with Visa and GDP, like the really great training it had, the small cohort, and yeah, just knowing what I liked and didn't like from past experiences is what helped, push me into my full-time role. And I also did a summer program when I interned at Google at Harvard. It's called Summer Venture and Management Program, SVMP. And I highly recommend doing that as well, because that's what really made me think about graduate school education and going to business school. And I ended up going to HBS or Harvard Business School before starting my now business after Northwestern. And so I think that Northwestern was just so helpful in just trying different experiences and opening up opportunities. And a lot of my experiences from just going to Google and then, working at Visa was just seeing what I liked and didn't like, and really trying to, push for things I liked. And I was able to do that as well at Visa when I joined, and I pushed for opportunity to work internationally, which hadn't happened before. And I moved to Johannesburg with a business because I knew I wanted to be working in the continent of Africa. And, San Francisco to South Africa was like very far, and there was no structured program, but one was created, and I was able to get that opportunity. So no process of elimination, I would say, and just trying different things was what I was doing as an undergrad. And when I started to see things I liked and liked more, I just gravitated towards that. And because I knew what I was liking, I could communicate that with, managers or colleagues, and they helped me kind of get to where I wanted to be when I was able to articulate what that is. And that's something I still use today, very much so.
What were the main things you were looking within these jobs and internships while looking for these opportunities after undergrad?
It's a great question. So coming into the recruitment process happened, Northwestern has structured recruitment, and that for full-time jobs, that happens in the fall. So right when you get back on campus in, August, September, October, there's recruiting. And I had just I had come off of the summer where I was at Google. I had spent a week at Harvard Business School, and, I knew I didn't want to be in the ad sales space at Google, but I wanted to, maybe be in tech, and very much so understanding the more technical aspects of business. And so I applied to everything. So I did cast a wide net, and I would recommend applying to many things. And it was actually through that, so I did the resume drop. I got a lot of on-campus interviews through that process. So I had mentioned there were like 9 different companies. So it was, Microsoft, Nielsen, Target, Visa. I think all consulting and all the top firms, and just it was just a flood. And then I got a lot of positive responses after I went to like the networking sessions that were happening on campus. And that's where you first get to meet some of the people at the firms, and you're able to at least try to build relationships. And so Northwestern alums, and some of them had been in the same student groups as me, or some of them were friends of friends, because a lot of alumni come back for these things. And so just trying to build a relationship with whoever was recruiting, I got a better understanding of the company. But then, after the initial resume drop, you're invited for a first round of interviews. And then through that interview process, you're selling yourself to these companies, but you're also trying to understand, if is this a place I want to work? And so, asking questions around, culture and, understanding what the responsibilities are in the roles, looking at if it's possible to do lateral moves, to look at different sides of the business. I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of me like 12 years ago to think about how those questions or how that would work out. I think part of my brain was like, I'm just trying to get a job. And so, I might not know what to ask, but I think that if I try to reflect back, I think a lot of it was trying to just, build relationships with the Northwestern alumni who were at the firms, who could be, who were in the same student group as you, who built rapport with you, and who can be really honest about their experiences. Because as much as they want you to join the company, they want you to be happy and succeed. And, the more you build a relationship, the more honest that they can be with you about that, because, ultimately they also want to recruit you, but it needs to be positive. So, essentially resume drop, then, there's like dinners or like networking things that the companies organize. They have on-campus interviews, and then they have super days or final interviews where they fly you out mainly to their headquarters. And so there was a lot of travel. Then I went like all over the country, back to California a few times. Target was in Minneapolis. I think Nielsen was in Chicago. A lot of the consulting firms were in Chicago. And again, when you actually get to the office, you get a feel of, what the office layout is like. You get to talk to different people at the, companies. And I think that you need to understand what is important for you. And so maybe you might want to develop a financial modeling or a technical skill set. So you might say, what are some of the projects that are in, X group at, at Visa? Or, I know it's a rotational program, but how is the actual mentorship or the training structured? Is it just with your direct manager, or do you have other types of programs? And they'll tell you, oh no, we have, a lot of companies will bring in, modeling on the street, or, different interpersonal workshops and different things to train you. So it's good to ask questions around like, what type of development opportunities do you have for staff who are coming in early? And, what are mentorship structures like? Is there a formal process or informal process? What are certain affinity groups like? And just asking those questions and getting contacts within different parts of the organizations can help you better understand the company. But the process starts with you and what you really want. Like work-life balance might be something that's important to you. And, you might say, what is work-life balance like? And they'll say, there's none, we work always. And you're like, okay, great, I don't want to do that. Or you might say, I want to work a lot because I'm young and really want to learn and dig in. They'll say, great, we have a ton of projects that we can throw at you so you can learn fast and quickly. But it's a lot of this process is really introspective and understanding, what you like and don't like, and the different classes you take, different research opportunities you take. And I loved how you said, you don't want to do research, and from your experience at Posner. And so you can rule that out, but maybe there are elements of the research you like, public health element or global public health, and, how you can marry that with maybe, a GE who has a global, footprint, or a pharmaceutical company that has a global footprint, and, what are opportunities like, and is there ways to work in different offices overseas if you just don't want to be US based? So it all depends on things that you like, and making sure that you ask questions to both the recruiters and the alumni who work within these firms to see if these companies offer that for you.
Thank you so much, Nikki. How does your art and science background play out in your work today?
That's a great question. I think that it is critical to the work I do today. And I feel like I've had many careers, both, working at Visa and tech, and now scaling up Chaku Foods, which is an ag tech business that's focused on, and, creating farmer wealth, improving yields, and looking at food security from a global context, all of which are critically important right now. And I'm based in Ghana right now, and we're working to, have a finished products and export those actual brands to the US, but then we're also looking at how we scale our technology to other businesses. And when you think about, political science, which is the major I had at Weinberg, there's a lot of theoretically based concepts about, how does this framework hold true in a certain situation? And if I'm trying to, I'll give a better example of when I was at Visa. I moved from the San Francisco office to the Johannesburg office, and VisaNet is this very vast, payment system. And at the time, there was a lot of work that we were doing with large financial institutions like, Bank of America, Chase, around how we were changing some routing technologies based off of legislation that happened with government. There was a lawsuit from Walmart headed by Senator Dick Durbin from Illinois that really kind of shook up the business. And when you think about it from Weinberg and an arts and sciences perspective, you need to anticipate government regulation, geopolitical threats, and how you operate a business, especially one that's as big as VisaNet, and especially with me at Chaku, from trying to create, technology networks amongst farmers in emerging markets that I'm trying to scale to other countries. Like, what are the implications of that? And so, from a VisaNet perspective, once I moved to Johannesburg, there were issues around some of the, pricing mechanism. I know this is being recorded and I have to be vague. So there were some issues around some pricing elements of how we look at how VisaNet works in countries in sub-Saharan Africa versus how it works in established markets like the US. And because of my, Weinberg thinking and the fact that the team I was on was very nimble and entrepreneurial, I was able to help lobby by developing a business case about how much cash was in the economy at the time across 11 different markets, and why changing certain payment levers that Visa has for the sub-Saharan African market will actually open up electronic payments, especially in the case where mobile money was dominant at the time. So we had M-Pesa in Kenya, which is Safaricom based. We have MTN mobile money. And so by, headquarters in the US, where people don't necessarily fully understand the landscape, but make decisions about countries like, South Africa and Ghana and, Nigeria and all these places, you really have to be able to articulate, this is how our business model operates with developed financial institutions at scale in the US. These are nascent markets for us, but there are a lot of competitors who are here. And this is how we can partner to open up, government payments, like things like your passport processing, things like everyday spend, like going to grocery stores, things like petrol stations. All of this was cash. And, having visited Ghana and having family there, visited Ghana actually when I was at Northwestern, I saw and understood those elements of the economy and the market. And so once I was working on business cases at Visa to develop them, I could articulate, this is the landscape. And we also talked to banks and financial institutions. So I'd say, this is the landscape. This is what we've seen. This is what the data is saying. And this is what we need to do to actually have these business changes. And all of that involves, a lot of the theory that I was looking at. I wish I had my class list, but I can think about the poli-sci classes, but a lot of those, the thinking around the business that I was doing, which was real time and, putting together decks, presenting to executives, lobbying, for resources in the US was around, how I'm thinking about these problems, because it's not just building a solution and then it works in the US and we make all this money until we go to a different market and it works. It's like, no, you have regulation, you have, expensive device costs for terminal payments. Like, you have all of these things that you need to consider and see the role that you play in changing that. And so much of that is just thinking, because, businesses want to hire you because of your thinking and level of innovation, depending on the role and the industry that you're in. And a lot of that had to do with what I was learning and building in Weinberg when I was taking all these different classes that were talking about, political, policy and change theory and all these things. They applied very much so to what I was doing at Visa.
Thank you so much for sharing. I have one more last question, and then I'll pass it to Cassie after this. What do you wish you could tell yourself when you were in our shoes as students?
Yeah, that's a great question. I have to dust off the cobwebs to about 15 years ago. And speaking with you briefly, I love the fact that you are, passionate about global public health, but then you're also touched about mental health. And I think that, I ran around the lake Phil. I was very fit. I was very focused on academics, but so much of the pressures, the pressure that we put on ourselves can impact our mental health. And I think that, getting into the habit of creating healthy habits. So, eating foods that are healthier. Sometimes I do all like the hot cookie bars. I don't know if they still have that in Hinman, or, I'm like, I just need to eat a bunch of hot cookie bars because I'm stressed out. And it's like, maybe you just need to go for a walk, or, go to Shad, or, drink water, or, talk to like a mental health professional to, get habits that help to manage stress and everything that happens around you on campus. I think another thing would just be that everything is going to work out. I feel like sometimes, we're just, when you're undergrad at Northwestern, you're this type A overachiever, like you did all these things in high school, we're a part of so many student groups where we're just doing so many things that are really great and, expanding us in different ways. But it's good to know that you are at a phenomenal institution. Like Northwestern is great. By that alone, it's opening up a world of opportunities for you. And so just taking a step back to just, know that everything will be okay. Focusing more on inwards about what you like, what you don't like, journaling if possible, and, looking at CAPS and, trying to see if there are ways that you can balance your mental health so that you can experience the fullness of everything that you have around you, instead of maybe feeling like, you have to get the high GPA and the internship and the student group activity and all of these things, but you can experience joy in what you're doing as well as you're doing it. And you're all going to be great. So, so just don't stress. And it's hard to think about now, but it's true.
Thank you so much, Nikki. I could pass it to Cassie now. I don't know if students had questions.
Yeah, thanks so much, Rosabelle. And I will remove your spotlight so you can hang out and, feel free to ask more questions, Rosabelle, as they come up. And Nikki, thank you so much. This has been great. I will continue to encourage students, feel free to send in your questions to me through a private chat if you would like me to ask them, or through the public chat if you'd like to, turn your mic on and ask Nikki yourself. And to get us started, I have a question around the building connections. I thought your advice was so helpful around, making connections to what you were saying today and what the students are interested in and how they can reach out to you. And I'm curious if you have advice for students on the call today who aren't sure exactly what they're interested in yet. Maybe we have some students on the call who haven't even selected their major. Maybe they're undecided. How can these students network and build connections? And what advice do you have for students who don't have the focused outreach just yet?
Sorry. I think that's a great question. And I know that in Weinberg, there's a required curriculum, like a core set of classes you have to take. I don't know, I'm assuming that's still true. And then there's ones that are towards your major. So one thing I would look at doing is if there's a way to build connections with upperclassmen through student groups. So whether and you don't have to be in student groups too, it can be through activities, but I think student groups have shared interests. It's a great way, whether it's, student government, affinity groups. I was in the undergraduate Black Management Association. I had done African Student Association. I was in the ASG, the student government group that funded different types of student groups. And based off of those activities, there were always seniors and juniors and upperclassmen. And I would often ask, what are interesting classes that you would take, or what are different professors that you would recommend. And I find that when I took, a material science class for that elective credit, or, the Spanish language class, or the poli-sci class, or the econ classes, through those professors or classes, it helped me kind of eliminate things I like and don't like, but then also building relationships with TAs and professors within those classes helped to understand, if I do like this, what are some internship or different career opportunities that might interest me, and they might pass forward leads and different things. But I think just trying to do different classes, do different activities, understand what you like and don't like. And I know that Northwestern offers externship programs as well. So if you have time and ways to do different internships or do different projects during the school year, it's a great way to look at different types of industries. There are also courses within the business institutions program as well, that I had taken that had business cases around different types of businesses. And so there are just different ways in which you can, interact with topic areas or classes or get different internships throughout the year that can help you understand what you like and don't like. But I think trying many things and then eliminating what you don't like and understanding what you don't like about it and moving to things you do like is a good strategy.
Yeah, I really appreciate that advice and getting out there and trying and doing the things to know, okay, I like this, I don't like this about it. And I also like how you mentioned, connecting with upperclassmen, because I think, so often the message gets sent to students that the networking is, with alumni or, people outside in the industry, and the networking that's happening in the student groups and the connections they're building with classmates is also really valuable in figuring out what you might want to do and what you enjoy. So I really appreciate that advice. And it looks like we have a question from Bruno. Bruno, do you want to turn your mic on and chat with Nikki a little bit about your question? I'm not sure if his mic, I can't hear him, but I can read Bruno's question. I think it's a really good one and would love to hear more about this. Oh, in the library. Okay, perfect. Bruno, I will ask, can you talk more about the resources and connections you've learned from to be able to start your own company?
Yes, yeah, that's a great question. And so I started my company after working for over 5 years, and I started it when I was in business school at Harvard. And I got the idea from the business when I was working in Visa and Joburg, and I saw that, I saw the revenue they were making, and they're making a lot of money, and that was not being like billions in revenue that we saw on VisaNet, but none of that was actually being impacted by a large set of farmers on the continent. And I thought, if we can't get ag distribution chains right here, like in our continent and into retail, to actually uplift farmers in communities where I grew up when I was younger, then we won't be able to accelerate economic development within our countries. And so that broader thought process was in my mind, but I didn't know how to actually build a business around it. And so I was thinking about it at Visa. And then when I went to business school, and you guys are at Northwestern now, and you have great resources. So I'll speak to my process and practical things that you can be doing right now as an undergrad at school to do it. So for me, I ended up going to Harvard Business School. I started my first year, and I was just working on the business case, trying to get data around what I was trying to build at the time. And it ended up being initially the CPG company, and working with plantain farmers to build a product, get it to market. It's so bootstrap, build an MVP, get customers, learn for that whole process. So in the summer after my first year, I actually went to Ghana, got a contract manufacturer, built a brand, started testing out selling to retailers actually in South Africa. So I stayed on the continent with the first distribution channel. And I got a lot of positive traction with that whole cycle, that process. Build a product, which is the MVP. So the initial product was like our first Nikki's Plantain Crisp brand, test it and get customer feedback. So initially we're selling at farmers markets before we're able to get packaging in China, develop a brand and sell it into retail, which was like the second phase of actually scaling up the business. And I was able to use resources from, again, this is the business school lens, but so from Harvard to actually sponsor me to work on it in the summer. I'd used some of my savings, having worked at Visa for years, to actually like put money into the business as well. But most of it was funded through a grant from Harvard to work on in the summer. And I was able to, pay like a few interns like to help out early on with, sales and getting numbers around what people liked and didn't like about the brand when we were prototyping and testing. And it was such a short amount of time during the summer. And so I actually ended up leaving the business program at Harvard and, jumping into the business full time to get it, to try to get it at scale. And it was during that time that I was able to, get a packaging manufacturer in China and like get it into retail and really understand more elements of the business. And so I did that for about 3 years. And then I went back to Harvard Business School. And when I was back at HBS, I was able to get, talk to different, VC firms, social impact firms, work with professors who were really excited about the concept and the process that I had made. I had very specific questions that needed to be answered. So, when COVID had hit, instead of having a contract manufacturer in China, like how do I move it to the US? Since we actually got into Facebook and Palo Alto right before COVID. So there were a lot of different areas of the business that were moving around. So there was a professor who had exited, a visiting professor who had exited a CPG-based company and had a big exit. And so he was able to help with that. When I was working on different solutions around like the AI that we're building so that we can better source from farmers so that they can make more money, we can have better quality products. I was able to work with the Harvard iLab to get an advisor who was really advanced in the space, who was able to help think through our business model and, if that approach made sense. And then also how I can get more data-focused analytic skill sets to actually help do that work. While I looked at other elements of the business. So a lot of it is around first having the idea that you want to build, and just starting it in a small testing environment, and then seeing how you can scale it. And as you scale it, get different resources. I know that there's a newly built entrepreneurship center on campus. I think it's by Shad. I think Cassie can speak more to it. It didn't exist when I was an undergrad, but they have a lot of great resources that can be used in terms of 3D printing, if you're doing a physical product, financial support in terms of modeling and scaling, and yeah, just the BIP office as well has a lot of great resources from a business and entrepreneurial perspective.
Yeah, that's really helpful, Nikki. We have the garage, which is a space for startups to get resources. And I would encourage, Weinberg College students, this is a space for you. It's for all students. I know there's, a lot of other students from different schools that utilize that space, but it is open to Weinberg College students. And as Nikki is sharing, there's a huge asset to the arts and sciences background in starting companies. And also the Farley Center for Entrepreneurship. Thanks, Joseph, for popping those links in there. Some really good resources for startups and starting companies. So Nikki, thank you for sharing that. And we have a question. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing the student's name correctly, but Abel, would you like to turn your mic on and ask your question?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Rico. I'm an international student, just like you are. And so my question is, how did you know that it was the right time for you to kind of jump ship and go back home and start your business as opposed to keep pursuing your career in the US? Because sometimes it can get really enticing with the job offers and all those opportunities. So how did you really know that it was the right time? And how did you make that decision to go back and try to start your own thing? And also, how did you prepare for it?
Yeah, those are all really great questions. And for me, my entrepreneurship journey, I think it was very methodical. And this goes into a bit of the answer that for Bruno's question around attracting resources and connections. The problem I was trying to solve is a bigger problem around agricultural equity. So chocolate is over $100 billion revenue industry, and Ghana, where I'm from, in Cote d'Ivoire, this is just an illustrative example, produces 70% of the world's cocoa, and they're the leading input for chocolate. And those communities, one of which I had lived in out in Kumasi, have almost none of that value. They get less than 2 billion, and almost nothing goes to the farmers. And so there's this really great industry in terms of, chocolate as the example in ag, where there's this huge problem where there's this global dislocation. And what that does is it leads to people like me, having to migrate from Ghana to the US as a kid, because the community I'm from doesn't have access to those financial resources. It impacts education, water, roles. So that's why my family migrated to the US, because our communities, weren't developed, and our communities are agricultural based. And so this is more, personal, I guess. I'm obviously a Black woman. Not everyone has their cameras on or can see, but so as I've been able to, build my career, there was this underlying theme of, I was one of two Black and African client-facing women in the visa office in Joburg. I was the only Black and African client-facing person in, the visa office in Dubai, which is Central Europe, Middle East, and Asia. Middle East and Africa office, SAMIA. And so when I think about what it means to be me and be the only me in these spaces, a lot of it stems from these, agricultural inequities in agrarian places that I'm from in Ghana, these broader socioeconomic issues. And with me kind of being the only person, it always created some type of, social challenge or something that I was trying to navigate as I was building my career. And when I got to Dubai with visa, I was making, 6 figures. I was very comfortable. I had no student debt. I had some debt that paid off early in my career. And I found that, even if that number kept increasing, is this what I'd still want to be doing? And would I feel okay given that I have this great education, these great career opportunities, I can see the trajectory, or do I think I can use my skills for a bigger problem? And again, I saw kind of what these bigger problems were. I knew that I had built up a financial cushion to at least try. And I had an idea that I wanted to test. And I think that's important. If you have an idea, you see that there's a big market and you see that there can be a big social impact, which I did at the time. I felt that I was 26 going on to 27, so I was still quite young, but I'm in early 30s now, but I felt that was a good time. I had a great network and a good skill set, and I was ready to kind of work on this business. And Harvard was for business school was a great segue to actually, test this idea in terms of first a CPG product, then iterating for the AI and the ag to scale the impact for farmers. And that made me feel comfortable doing it. All the career, the networks, all the tags I had, that I would be able to attract resource and have the skill set to do this well. And that's a very personal decision, to your point. And so you need to know if, financially, you're in a position to, leave your job. And, for me, going to business school helped to cushion that, because Harvard had other resources, both financially, structure, and networks that helped me do that. My Northwestern network was super helpful and valuable. Even now, I'm going to be going to a conference next week in Dakar called, Feeding Africa, and I was invited through the African Development Bank. But that lead came through one of my, best friends, and he was like a mentor from Northwestern undergrad, who is connected through these networks, and said this would be really relevant for your business, and they'd be a great partner to have. So a lot of this becomes very circular, right? Having a tech lens in my business and having worked in tech is important. Being in the African Student Association, because I'm from Ghana, and there were other people who grew up in the US, who were from Senegal and Nigeria and all these other places, who also had the similar interests and maybe later on had careers in this space. Being in the student groups committee, where you meet people from students from different years and ages, and who've gone on to do different things. I have a friend who's working for the USTDA Trade Association based in Joburg, who was 2 years older than me and was in Tridel at, Northwestern. And I was not in Tridel or did any of those things. And, she's Japanese American and, went to international school, but we're connected now and we're friends through interacting in Joburg. So I think that you'd be surprised at how the different touch points and the things that you do and you're attracted to in undergrad will help as you build your career if you lean into that. And it's just about really trusting yourself and understanding where you at, mentally, emotionally, financially, to kind of make that leap and where the world is right now, because climate and food security are two really important topics. And, even the timing of the business in that intersection has made me very confident. And, obviously, Harvard has been great. I actually won an award for being one of the best ventures out of 400 student teams in 2021. And so there are a lot of other resources that have come through that network as well, that has helped me with the business.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And of course, if people have follow-up questions, I'd encourage them to either send them in or, ask Nikki over LinkedIn. And, Nikki, I love hearing you pull in all of these different experiences you had and how they've been helpful now in your career. And I think something that I love, to share with students is, you didn't necessarily know that your participation in all of these different things would tie into what you're doing now. I hear this from students a lot that, it all makes sense now because, you're successful in what you're doing. But I think it's important for students to hear just how you, described you're doing things you enjoy and you're figuring out what you might want to do along the way. And by doing things you enjoy, later on, it'll tie into your path, right? Whether it's the first thing or later on, which I think is just so valuable, Nikki. And of course, we're approaching the end of our hour with you. I want to give you the last word if you have any other insights that you'd like to share with students today.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time. I think that if there's something that, and it ties into the last question, that was really powerful about my time at Northwestern, that's leaded into me, being an entrepreneur, starting my own business, even moving back to Ghana, my home country that's not as stable economically as the US or some other places. It would be that I always try to say no to things that don't align with you, even if they're common and popular to everyone else. And the more you trust your instincts in saying no to things, the more confident you will be that you're saying yes to the right thing for you. An example of this is, when, again, it's hard because Google's a big company now, but it wasn't at the time. And because everyone told me to go to finance, do SEO, and take that role, it felt very uncomfortable to take the Google opportunity because it wasn't the popular or the common or the clear financial role to take. But because I said no to that, that finance opportunity went to Google, I was able to feel comfortable saying no to things if I knew that I didn't like, the culture or the hours of banking or all these things. Even though it was popular, I could say no and find a different way to learn and make money and do other things. And the more you're able to, and it can be as simple as, you don't feel comfortable going to a certain party on campus, or you don't feel comfortable doing something that a lot of people around you are doing. And the more you build that internal voice of saying like no to things that are uncommon or unpopular, things that are common and popular, the more that you trust your own instincts and your gut. And that's something I have to do, frequently and often. So whether it's the wrong investor for the cap table or whether it's, the path I've chosen. So try to say yes to yourself and no to things that don't align to yourself.
I
know that seems vague, but yeah.
That's great. I wrote it down myself. I think it's great advice for now and for the future as students continue to decide what makes sense to them, right? Nikki, thank you so much for spending this hour with us today. And of course, Rosabelle, for moderating the conversation. We really appreciate you being here. And, students, keep an eye out for a follow-up email from my colleague, Joseph, who's on the call today. He's going to follow up with some more information and your $20 Grubhub credit, because normally we buy students lunch, but of course we can't do that virtually. So we'll send you all a Grubhub credit, and really thank you all for being here. And we hope you have a great rest of your day. Go Cats.